What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I want to tell you about a new card game that I think looks absolutely awesome. It is Soulforge Fusion, and I talk about a lot of card games on this channel, right? And I like card games. I think I've made that pretty gosh darned clear. However, this is one that I think we should all be getting a little bit excited about. And yes, obviously, there are comparisons to Keyforge. We'll talk about that as we go through. I mean, partly, it is inescapable, right? I don't really want to introduce one card game with reference to another, but the parallels really are inescapable here, and I think ignoring them would be fairly silly. And also, I don't see this as a bad thing, because Keyforge is awesome, and I know that a bunch of people who follow this channel are fans of Keyforge, so I don't think it's terribly bad at all. So, what we've basically got here is Soulforge Fusion, which is a new card game that has just gone up on Kickstarter. And I mean just gone up on Kickstarter in the past couple of days. Now, incidentally, the Kickstarter was funded in 26 minutes. So if you're interested in the Kickstarter, it's already gone, you're good. I should mention the Kickstarter is US only at the moment. I was very lucky. I sat down with a couple of people from Stoneblade we played a game and we chatted through a bunch of stuff and they gave me a whole bunch of information. It is US only for the Kickstarter, but they are looking for a worldwide release next year, so don't worry. If you can't join in the Kickstarter, you can still get pretty gosh darn hyped and excited, so don't worry your pretty little heads about it. So what is the game? Well, it is from Richard Garfield, who is the creator of Magic the Gathering, and Justin Gary, who is the creator of the Ascension deck building game. So if you're looking for pedigree of people designing the game, you're there, ladies and gentlemen. You are there. And essentially the way it works, there are 4 factions in the game. And you basically take 2 decks from different factions, 2 half decks, and you mash them together, and that becomes your deck with which you play throughout the game. Now, obviously, with Keyforge, the deal was, and that was also designed by Richard Garfield, so again, that connection is inescapable. In Keyforge, the deal was you got a deck, and you played it. Here, you get half decks, and you mash 2 half decks together, which means the amount of garbage half decks you're going to have is significantly going to decrease, because of course, you might have a half deck you really don't like, but all it takes is to then find a new half deck with which it pairs nicely, and I am hyped to see people over on Facebook, etc., trying to find half decks that complement their own, so they can mash together and make some awesome, amazing deck. So you take 2 half decks, you mash them together, boom, that's your deck. It's not deck building in the traditional sense, but there absolutely is an element of deck building there, which I think we can all get, honestly, pretty gosh darned excited about. So the way the game works is you essentially have 5 cycles of 3 turns. And you obviously take it in turn to be the person going first, and you get to play 2 cards with no resources or anything like that. You play a card, your opponent plays a card, you play a card, your opponent plays a card, and then that's the end of the turn. 3 turns per cycle, 5 cycles for the game. When the 5 cycles are over, the game is over. That's it. You done. And there's no resources, so you can play whatever you've got in your hand as you like, assuming, you can and all of that. And then at the end of every turn, combat happens. So you essentially play 2 cards, your opponent plays 2 cards, and then combat happens. And after 3 turns, you complete the cycle. And after 5 cycles, you finish the game. And assuming nobody's won, which obviously you can until then. Now, in terms of winning the game, it's fairly straightforward. You both start with a health counter of 50 health. And when the other person goes down to 0 health, you win the game. Unless, of course, you go down to 0 health, in which case your opponent wins the game. And the combat is all lane-based. So there are lanes as you go through the game. I should say there are 5 lanes. And you basically put your creatures, your fighters, call them what you will, in one of those lanes. So then you've got that back and forth of if you are in an unblocked lane, and you're at the front. If you're the first player who plays per turn, you go at the front, otherwise you go at the back. If you are at the front and you're unblocked, you get to deal damage to your opponent. If you're at the back, you can't fight, but you can defend. So then there's all kinds, and obviously you defend at the front as well. And then there's all kinds of questions of, I've got this dude, am I using this dude to defend from an opponent's attack, or put in an empty lane to make my own attack? But if I put in an empty lane and then my opponent blocks me, then I'm being blocked and we're kind of at a stalemate, but then this other creature is going through, and that's what makes it fun. And that's the thing I really want to stress, right? I played this game, I sat down with a couple people from Stoneblade Entertainment, we played a game, chatted through everything. It's a really fun game. Now, the game I played was a very tense back and forth where we were constantly frustrating each other, playing down creatures to block, looking for the big opening. If anyone's ever played Marvel Champions, it gave a real vibe of that, which is setting up and you're getting rid of in Marvel Champions, it's get rid of the minions, get rid of the side schemes, and then there's that one turn where you can smash. It felt a bit like that. It's not the only way to play the game, I should add, because, of course, you can just not block your opponent and just both absolutely rush and go for it. And that is very, very fun. But there's also a lot of other decisions. So as a nice example here, when you play a card, the next level of that card gets put into your discard pile. I should say at the end of a cycle, your discard pile gets shuffled up, and then that becomes your deck. So essentially, it just keeps going. So you might have a creature that you don't actually want to play, but if you play the creature, then the second stage of the creature ends up in your discard pile, and you really want the second stage of that creature for the future. So essentially, you start with all level 1 creatures, or cards, but then when you play the level 1, the level 2 gets put into your discard pile. So next time it won't be the level 1, it will be the level 2. And then if you play the level 2, the level 3 gets put in your discard pile. So the next time you're not playing the level 2, you're playing the level 3. So to take an example, let's just take some random example here. It doesn't really matter who we go for. We could take a look at Stabilizing Sentry, 3 attack, 2 health. Classic thing, right? When you're fighting, you just deal damage. So Stabilizing Sentry will deal 2 damage to whatever it's up against and can take 2. If the creature is fighting against has more than 3 health, it'll deal 3 damage, the creature will survive, otherwise it will go away. If Stabilizing Sentry is dealt 2 damage, it goes away. But it's got 2 armor, and when you deploy, you may return a creature to its original power and health, which is pretty good. That's an alright creature. But then if you play that, the level 2 goes into your discard pile, so the next time you read Stabilizing Sentry, you've got 6 attack, 3 health, 5 armor, and that same deploy skill, which is pretty gosh darn good, but by playing it, the level 3 goes into your discard, and the next time Stabilizing Sentry comes out, it's 11 power, 6 health with 10 armor, and that same deploy skill. So you'll see there that essentially, as you go through the game, you may well end up playing cards to level them up. And this is where we start to deviate from things like Keyforge, because yes, there is absolutely an element here of making the deck you've got work for you, but the fact that you're mashing 2 half decks together really helps. And also, you've got this playing cards to level them up. You basically always have a hand of 5 cards to start a turn, and you're playing 2 of those 5 cards. So the decision of which of those cards to play becomes absolutely huge, both in terms of what you're doing now and how your deck is going to look in the end game, and that for me is why it was so fascinating to play. Not planning on doing a full how to play rules in this particular video, but just, there's gameplay playing as we go through this video, trying to give you a little bit of a taste, and it's basically, you've got your hand of 5 cards, you play 2 of them throughout the turn. After you've all played 2 cards, fight happens, 3 turns, 5 cycles, and it really is, where do I put the creature? Which lane do I put it in? Do I play cards to try and level them up for future cycles, or do I just play things that are going to help me now? And it is an extremely strategic game where you will be thinking about every single turn, which is not always the case. and it's manipulated in that way, and I say that in a good way, because you've got those 5 lanes, because you're only playing essentially 2 out of every 5 cards you draw, because you can level up those cards for future cycles. It makes a real difference what you do on a turn-by-turn basis, and that is pretty awesome. Now, you also have essentially your character card. Now, we all know in Keyforge you had Archons. The Archons didn't do anything. Oh, that is not the case here. You will notice that Ironbeard is essentially your character that you're playing as, but you'll notice that there are skills. Now, in Cycle 1, there's no skill, but in Cycle 2, you can summon a gizmo. Those are basically generic token creatures at the side that you can summon with various cards, and you upgrade a level 1 card in your hand. And at some point during Cycle 2, you get to do that whenever you feel like it. In Cycle 3, you get Overload. This turn, when a creature you control is replaced, that basically means you play one creature over another, which is something you are allowed to do. You may resummon it in an empty lane. Move it to an empty lane, essentially, so that you can then get an attack off. And then at some point in Cycle 4, you may summon up to 2 Mega Gizmos, again they're token creatures, and give your robot 6 armor this turn. Which is awesome, because it basically gives you a huge advantage. But the other player is going to have this as well. So choosing when to activate those skills during the cycle is a huge thing. And if you don't activate it in any turn during the cycle, then you don't get to use it. And that's clearly a silly thing, and you'll lose out. And that's not really a good idea. So you're definitely going to want to use that at some point. It is a really, really fun game. Also, I should mention, although I did play a game through with some dudes from Stoneblade and chat to them for a good couple of hours, this isn't a sponsored video. They didn't ask me to make this. They didn't pay me to make this. They've not given me any free stuff to make this video. They thought I would be interested. They showed me the game. I am interested, and any gushing you hear in this video is not because Stoneblade have hooked me up or anything stupid like that. It is because I genuinely love this game. I'm excited for this game. There is one negative thing you're going to hear me say in this video, and the negative thing you're going to hear me say is Kickstarter is US only. Because I'm telling you right now, if it wasn't US only, I would have backed it already. However, I had a good chat with the dudes. This is going to be a worldwide game, but the Kickstarter, and again, I've taught business for many years, this makes perfect sense. The Kickstarter is a bit of a test case. They're starting small, making sure the Kickstarter is successful. And let's face it, we all know they're using the Kickstarter to fund production, which is exactly what companies should be doing. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. I don't really want to wait till next year, but it looks like we're going to have to wait till early next year to do that. Boo, hiss, etc. Few other points just kind of as we go through. They are looking to release about 3 sets a year, which means there are going to be regular releases. This is a good thing. They are looking to actually have proper organized play with actual tournaments, etc., which is very, very cool. And here is basically the best part for me. They are embracing Tabletop Simulator. Some companies love it, some companies really don't and put out statements against it. There is no quote-unquote official online client for Soulforge Fusion, but what there is Tabletop Simulator, which is not just being supported and encouraged by Stoneblade, but actively used. They are the people doing the Soulforge Fusion mod, and their aim is to update it so by the time a new set drops, that new set will work in Tabletop Simulator. Every half deck will come with a QR code, and yes, you scan the QR code, and yes, that puts the half deck into Tabletop Simulator, so you can take your actual decks, scan them in, and play them in Tabletop Simulator, and have a working online client. No, obviously, Tabletop Simulator is not as good as having an actual bespoke online client, blah, blah, blah. But I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, I went and played on Tabletop Simulator, and it worked perfectly, and it was great. And there are many, many good card games out there right now that are not easy to play online. and where we're using webcams. This is not that game. There's nothing wrong with webcams, of course, but we all know the concerns with cheating, etc., etc. Here, you scan the QR code, you put it in Tabletop Simulator, and the makers of the game are the people who are making sure that it works in Tabletop Simulator and doing the updates and all of that. And that is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing indeed. And I'm in. I'm in on this game. This is not the last video you're going to see for this game. The key points you need to know are this. It is 2 half decks that you mash together to make a deck. The Kickstarter is live now. There should be a worldwide release early next year. It is fully supported by Tabletop Simulator, and they are doing the work on that. There are going to be regular releases. There is going to be organized play. And the game is awesome. And I really, really like it. And I intend to play a lot more of this. I did incidentally, like Keyforge, this is going to be built on an algorithm, i.e. the half decks are algorithmically generated. And they are very, very confident that the algorithm is good. And I had a good chat with them about the algorithm and how it works. Essentially, if you've got a card that refers to, I don't know, mages as an example, there's going to be some mages in your deck. The algorithm is built in with a thing that looks at the deck and goes, does this work? Not is it good, that's impossible to really tell, but does it work? And they're not going to be printing, they tell us, and I believe them on this, they're not going to be printing decks with cards that support mages that don't have mages, because that would be silly. And then, of course, remember, because it's 2 half decks mashed together, if there is anything from your deck that you think you're missing or that could make you better, or combos you're really looking for, that's where you go and look for the half deck that complements yours. This looks really good. On this channel, I'm honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you new games when I can. I tell you what I can about them, and I give you my honest opinion of them. And I'm telling you now, I played a game of this with the people from Stoneblade, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm a dude who's played a lot of card games. It convinced me that the mechanics are sound. But also, I spoke to them about the plans for the game moving forward, and this sounds really fun. I've shared with you in this video basically what I can. I think it's awesome, but I want to know what you think. So let me know in the comment section, would you? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @LeWasi. That's where we talk, well, about a whole bunch of card games, including this one. And do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wasi Plays.